The morning sky was gray, heavy with clouds that looked ready to cry. The sound of slow church bells echoed through the small town, spreading a quiet sadness across the streets. Inside the old stone church, people sat in silence, dressed in black. At the very front stood a small wooden coffin covered with white lilies. Lena sat there holding her baby close to her chest. Her arms trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the deep ache inside her heart. The baby, wrapped in a thin blue blanket, was only a few months old. He didn't understand what was happening, only that his mother's heartbeat felt uneven, full of pain. She stared at the coffin, her eyes empty, yet full of tears that wouldn't stop coming. Tom was gone. The man who had promised her forever was lying inside that box, never to open his eyes again. He had been her strength, her laughter, her safe place. Now all she had left was the soft cry of their baby, and a heart that didn't know how to beat without him. As the priest spoke gentle words about life and death, Lena barely heard them. Everything felt far away, like she was trapped in a dream she couldn't wake up from. Around her, whispers started to rise. Quiet at first, then sharper, colder. She could feel the stares, the judgment, even without looking up. Some of Tom's relatives were seated a few rows back. They had never liked her. They thought she wasn't good enough for him. Too poor, too quiet, too different. Now with Tom gone, they didn't bother to hide their resentment. "She didn't even bring flowers," one woman muttered. "She's only crying for herself," another whispered. Lena heard it. She tried to pretend she didn't, but her throat tightened. She wanted to leave, but she couldn't walk away from the man she loved, not yet. When the ceremony ended, the priest invited everyone to say their last goodbye. One by one, people walked to the front, bowed their heads, and whispered prayers. When it was Lena's turn, she stood up slowly, clutching her baby with one hand and touching the coffin with the other. "Thank you," she whispered softly, "for loving me, for believing in me. I promise I'll take care of him the way you would have." Her voice broke on the last word. As she turned to leave, she noticed a few of Tom's relatives watching her closely. One of them, a tall man with a hard expression, stepped forward. "You don't belong here," he said under his breath. Lena blinked, unsure if she heard right. "What do you mean?" "You've done enough," he said bitterly. "You had your time with him. Now you can go." "Go?" she repeated, stunned. "This is my husband's funeral," the man scoffed. "You think we don't know why you're really here? You want money, right? You think you'll get something out of this?" Lena shook her head. "No, I just came to say goodbye." But the whispers around her grew louder. Others joined in, feeding on each other's cruelty. Someone said Tom's death was her fault because she distracted him the day he had the accident. Someone else said she should never have married him, that she brought nothing but bad luck. Her heart raced. She looked around for a kind face, someone who might defend her, but no one spoke. The baby began to cry, sensing his mother's fear. "Please," Lena said softly. "Don't do this here." But the man stepped closer. "You heard me. Leave. You're not family." Before she could respond, he reached for her arm. Lena instinctively stepped back, holding her baby tighter. Her voice trembled as she said, "Don't touch me." But he didn't listen. He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her toward the door. The baby started crying louder, the sound echoing painfully through the church. The priest tried to calm everyone down, but no one listened. It all happened so fast. In moments, Lena found herself outside, standing on the cold stone steps, shaking in the rain. The heavy church doors closed behind her with a loud thud that felt like a final goodbye, not just to Tom, but to every bit of dignity she had left. She stood there for a long time, frozen. The rain soaked through her black dress, and the baby's blanket became damp. She tried to cover him with her shawl, but it wasn't enough. The world around her blurred into gray. A few people walked past her, pretending not to see. Others looked at her with pity but kept their distance. No one offered a hand. When she finally moved, her legs felt weak. She walked slowly down the road, not knowing where she was going. Every step felt heavier than the last. She had no home to return to. The small apartment she and Tom shared had already been taken by the landlord after his death. She had nothing. No money, no job, no family willing to help. By the time she reached the edge of town, her shoes were soaked, and her arms ached from holding the baby so tightly. She stopped under an old tree for shelter, whispering softly to her son, "It's okay, my love. Mama's here." The baby had fallen asleep, his tiny hand gripping her dress. She looked at his face, when so peaceful, so innocent, and felt both love and fear flood her heart. The world suddenly seemed too cruel, too big. She wondered how she would survive. The next few days were a blur. Lena tried to find somewhere safe to sleep. She went to a shelter, but it was full. She sat outside a closed cafe, shivering through the night. When morning came, she walked to the marketplace and tried to ask for work. "Do you have experience?" the shopkeeper asked. "I can clean, cook, anything," she replied. He glanced at the baby. "You can't work with that child crying all day. Come back when you found someone to take care of him." She nodded, though her heart sank. There was no one to leave him with. That night, she found an old shed behind a warehouse. It smelled of dust and oil, but it was dry. She laid her baby on her scarf and tried to rest, though sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed everything. The whispers in the church, the man's angry face, the door slamming shut behind her. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Why did they hate me so much?" She thought of Tom and how he used to hold her hand when things got tough. He would tell her, "You and me will make it, no matter what." Those words echoed in her memory like a small flame in the dark. The next morning she went to the local bakery. The smell of fresh bread made her realize how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten since the funeral. She asked the woman behind the counter if she could have something for free. Just a roll, anything. The woman looked her up and down, then sighed. "We don't give handouts," she said, turning away. Lena stepped back, trying not to cry. She didn't want anyone's pity. Just kindness. She sat down on the sidewalk outside, holding her baby and humming softly to keep him calm. The sun had come out, but her heart still felt cold. People passed by, some throwing quick glances, others pretending not to notice. Then she heard the sound of an engine, a deep, smooth hum. A black car stopped near the curb. From the corner of her eye, she saw the door open. A tall man in a dark coat stepped out. He looked around for a moment, then his gaze fell on her. Lena quickly looked away, embarrassed. She didn't want to seem like she was begging. The man hesitated, then walked toward her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. His voice was calm, not pitying, just kind. She looked up at him, unsure what to say. "We're fine," she whispered. He glanced at the baby, whose cheeks were flushed from hunger. "You don't look fine," he said softly. Something about his tone broke the wall she had built around herself. For the first time in days, she felt seen. Not judged, not blamed, just seen. She didn't tell him everything, just small pieces. That she had lost her husband. That she had nowhere to go. That she was trying her best for her baby. The man listened quietly. When she finished, he didn't ask for proof or details. He just said, "Wait here." He walked back to his car, spoke to his driver, then returned with a paper bag. Inside was food, warm bread, fruit, and a small bottle of milk. "Eat," he said simply. Lena wanted to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." The man nodded. "You don't owe me thanks. Just promise me you'll take care of that little one." "I will," she said, clutching her baby closer. He gave her a small card before leaving. "If you ever need help, call this number," he said. Then he got into his car and drove away. Lena looked at the card. It had a simple name printed on it, Raymond Cole. She didn't know who he was or why he had helped her. But for the first time since the funeral, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. That night, Lena sat in the same small shed she had been using for shelter. The baby was sleeping peacefully in her arms, his tiny fingers curled around her thumb. The paper card the kind stranger gave her lay beside her, the name Raymond Cole printed neatly across it. She kept looking at it, wondering if she should call. Part of her wanted to trust him. His voice had sounded kind, and his eyes held no judgment. But another part of her was afraid. Life had taught her that kindness often came with a price. What if he only helped her to make her owe him something later? Still, as she listened to her baby's slow breathing, she knew she couldn't keep living like this. The nights were getting colder, and she barely had food left. She decided to wait until morning and think again. When the first light touched the ground, Lena woke up stiff and sore. Her baby was hungry again, and she didn't have milk left. She remembered the small bottle the man had given her yesterday. It was almost empty, but it would have to do. She fed the baby carefully, whispering, "It's okay, love. Mama's got you." After she finished, she stared at the card once more. Her heart raced as she picked it up. Maybe he didn't mean it, she whispered to herself. Maybe he forgot. But deep down, something told her he hadn't. She walked to a small public phone booth near the marketplace. Her hands shook as she dialed the number. It rang only once before a calm voice answered, "Mr. Cole's office. How may I help you?" Lena froze. She hadn't expected someone else to pick up. I'm sorry," she stammered. "He gave me this card yesterday. He said if I needed help, I could call." The woman on the line hesitated for a second, then said kindly, "May I have your name, please?" "Lena," she said quietly. "Please hold for a moment." Lena waited, her heart pounding. She thought they might hang up, but instead a familiar voice came on the line. "Lena?" It was him. "Yes," she said softly, her throat tight. "I'm sorry to bother you." "You're not bothering me," Raymond said. "Are you safe?" She looked around at the busy street, the noise, the people walking by. I'm outside. I don't have anywhere to go." "Stay where you are," he said firmly. "I'll send someone to get you." Before she could protest, he added, "Trust me, please." The line went dead. About half an hour later, a dark car pulled up near the phone booth. A woman stepped out dressed in neat office clothes. She smiled warmly. "Lena, I'm from Mr. Cole's office. Please come with me." Lena hesitated for a moment, holding her baby tighter. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," the woman said gently. "He asked us to take care of you." Something in her voice felt genuine. Slowly, Lena nodded. She got into the car, clutching her baby close. For the first time in days, she sat on a soft seat. The hum of the car felt strange after all the walking and cold nights. When they arrived, Lena couldn't believe her eyes. The car stopped outside a quiet street lined with tall trees. At the end stood a beautiful guest house, simple but elegant, with a small garden full of flowers. "This will be your room," the woman said, showing her inside. "There's food in the kitchen and milk for the baby. You can rest. Mr. Cole will visit later today." Lena looked around the small but cozy room. The curtains were clean, the bed soft, and there was a warm smell of fresh bread coming from the kitchen. She couldn't remember the last time she felt this kind of peace. When she placed her baby on the bed, he smiled in his sleep. She sat beside him, covering her face with her hands. For the first time since the funeral, she cried, not out of pain, but from relief. A few hours later, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, Raymond stood there, wearing the same calm expression she remembered. He carried a small basket of fruit and some baby clothes. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said. Lena nodded, unable to speak. She stepped aside to let him in. He looked around the room, then at her. "You look better already," he said kindly. "Did you eat?" She nodded again. "Yes, thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I just did what anyone should do." She gave a small, sad smile. "Not everyone would." He looked at her for a long moment. "You don't trust people easily, do you?" "I used to," she said softly. "But after what happened, it's hard." "I understand," he said. "You've been through a lot. But I want you to know you're safe here. No one will hurt you or judge you." Lena felt something she hadn't in a long time, comfort. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling again. "I don't know how to start over," she admitted. "I have no family, no job, nothing." Raymond leaned against the table. "You have something," he said. "You have your child. And you have strength. That's a start." She looked at him, surprised by the way he said it, like he truly believed it. Over the next few days, Raymond's team made sure she had everything she needed. There was food, clothes, and even a small crib for the baby. Every morning, someone brought her fresh milk and checked if she needed help. Lena began to regain her color. She spent her days cleaning the little house, singing to her baby, and sitting by the window watching the sunlight move across the floor. It was peaceful, almost unreal. Sometimes Raymond would stop by, always bringing something, books, toys, or just warm company. He never asked too many questions, never made her feel small. Instead, he listened. One afternoon, while they were having tea in the garden, he asked, "What did you want to do before all this?" Lena looked down at her hands. "I wanted to teach. I was studying to be a teacher before I got married. But then life got in the way." Raymond smiled slightly. "You still can." She shook her head. It's too late. It's never too late, he said gently. You're young, smart, and kind. Those are the things that make great teachers. She didn't answer, but his words stayed with her long after he left. Days turned into weeks. Lena slowly started helping around the guest house, washing dishes, watering plants, and taking care of small tasks. She didn't ask for pay. She just wanted to feel useful again. One morning, she found a small envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a note from Raymond. It read, "There's a local community center that needs volunteers for their children's reading program. I thought of you." At first, she wasn't sure. She had been hiding from the world for so long, afraid of people's eyes and their cruel words. But something told her to try. That afternoon, she went to the center. The building was old but full of life, children laughing, running around, their joy filling the air. A kind woman welcomed her and showed her around. When Lena read a story to a small group of kids, her voice trembled at first. But as they listened, their faces full of wonder, she felt something awaken inside her, a part of her that had been buried under all the pain. When she came home that day, she smiled for the first time in months. Raymond visited later that evening. "So how was it?" he asked. "It was beautiful," she said, her eyes bright. "I forgot what it felt like to be needed." He nodded. "You belong in places like that." From then on, Lena went to the community center every few days. She read stories, helped the children with homework, and even started teaching basic lessons. She was still shy, still healing, but she was slowly building something new. Her baby, growing stronger each day, became the light of her small world. Everyone at the center adored him. They would laugh when he tried to copy the sounds of her voice during story time. Lena often caught herself thinking about the past, but it didn't hurt as much anymore. She started to see that life, even after loss, could still give unexpected gifts. One evening, as she watched the sunset from the porch, Raymond joined her. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft wind moving through the trees. "Do you ever think about why we meet certain people?" she asked quietly. "Every day," he replied. "Sometimes I think we cross paths with others at the exact moment they need us, or when we need them." Lena looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "Then maybe you were meant to stop that day." He smiled faintly. "Or maybe you were meant to remind me what kindness really means." They both laughed softly, the kind of gentle laugh that comes after long sadness. As night fell, she went inside to put her baby to sleep. She hummed a soft tune, her voice calm and full of love. When she looked out the window again, she saw Raymond's car driving away down the quiet road. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. She had lost everything once, but now, piece by piece, she was finding herself again. The days began to blend into one another, but this time not from sadness. For the first time in a long while, Lena's life had rhythm again. Every morning she would feed her baby, make tea, and walk to the community center. The children greeted her with laughter and hugs, and the sound of their small voices made her heart lighter. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to live. Sometimes she caught herself smiling for no reason, while folding baby clothes or when she saw the sunlight pour through the window. It was a quiet kind of happiness, the kind that grows slowly after too much darkness. One afternoon, as she was leaving the community center, she found Raymond waiting by his car. He looked as he always did, calm, gentle, but with a kind of quiet strength that made people stop and listen when he spoke. "Good day at work?" he asked with a small smile. Lena nodded. "The children were full of energy. I think they wore me out." He laughed softly. "That means you're doing something right." They began walking together toward the park across the street. It was late afternoon, the sky turning golden pink. The air smelled of rain and blooming flowers. "Do you ever miss your old life?" he asked after a while. Lena thought about it. "I miss the small things," she said quietly. "The sound of my husband's laughter, the way our house used to smell after he fixed something in the kitchen. But no, I don't miss the fear. I don't miss being blamed for things I never did. I think I just miss feeling safe with someone." Raymond nodded slowly. "You deserve that feeling again." "Everyone does." She looked at him curiously. "What about you? You seem like someone who already has everything." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes people think that. But wealth doesn't protect you from loneliness. It just makes it quieter." Lena looked at him thoughtfully, sensing there was more behind his words, but she didn't ask. Some silences didn't need filling. That evening, he drove her back to the guest house. As they stood by the door, he said, "There's something I'd like to talk to you about. May I come by tomorrow?" "Of course," she said, though curiosity flickered in her chest. The next morning, she woke early. She tidied the small kitchen, dressed her baby, and waited. When Raymond arrived, he looked unusually serious, carrying a folder in his hand. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began, taking a seat. "You're doing wonderful work at the center. You have talent, patience, and a gift with children. But I don't want this to be temporary for you. I want to help you build something of your own." Lena frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. "Something of my own?" He nodded. "A future, stability, a home." Her heart skipped a beat. "Raymond, you've already done too much. You've given me shelter, food, safety. I can't ask for more." "You didn't ask," he said kindly. "I'm offering." She fell silent. He opened the folder and slid a paper toward her. It was a document with her name written neatly at the top. "This is a small scholarship I've arranged in your name," he explained. "It will cover your teacher's certification. You can study part-time while still working at the center. When you finish, the community school nearby will offer you a job." Lena stared at the paper, her eyes wide. "I can't accept this," she said in a trembling voice. "It's too much." "It's not charity," Raymond said. "It's a chance. One you've earned." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Why are you doing this for me?" she whispered. He looked at her, his voice soft. "Because I believe in helping people who don't give up. You didn't stop fighting, even when the world turned its back on you. That deserves more than pity. It deserves support." Lena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, unable to speak. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a burden, not as someone broken, but as someone capable. She finally nodded. "All right," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll try. I'll study again." Raymond smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. That's all I wanted to hear. From that day on, Lena's life slowly began to change again. She divided her time between caring for her baby, helping at the center, and studying in the evenings. The lessons were hard at first. She hadn't studied for years, but she refused to give up. Every time she wanted to quit, she thought of her baby's smile and Raymond's quiet faith in her. Months passed. The leaves turned golden, then brown, then fell, and the air grew cold again. But this time, winter didn't scare her. She had a heater in her room, warm blankets, and a purpose that kept her heart alive. She started to grow closer to Raymond, though not in a romantic way. Their friendship was built on trust and respect. He never treated her like someone he was saving. He treated her like someone rebuilding herself. Sometimes he would stop by with books for her studies or toys for the baby. Other times they would just sit and talk. He would tell her about his work, how he had started his company from nothing, how he had once failed, how success didn't erase pain. "I lost someone too," he said one evening quietly. "My wife many years ago." Lena looked at him surprised. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded. "It's all right. I used to think I'd never feel normal again, but I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking." She understood those words deeply. They both sat in silence for a while, watching the snow fall outside. Time moved forward gently. Lena's baby learned to crawl, then walk. His laughter filled the rooms, his little hands reaching for everything he could grab. He became a symbol of how far she had come. At the community center, people began to notice her strength. The director often said, "You have a gift with people, Lena. You don't just teach, you lift others." One afternoon after class, a young mother approached her. "I heard about your story," she said quietly.
How you lost everything and started again.
"I just wanted to say you give me hope." Lena smiled, her heart swelling. "If I can do it, so can you." That night, when she returned home, she found a letter on the table. It was from the local council, congratulating her for completing her certification. She was officially a licensed teacher now. Her hands shook as she read the letter. She couldn't believe it was real. She looked at her baby, who was sitting on the floor playing with a wooden block. "We did it," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "We really did it." The next day, she went to thank Raymond in person. He was at his office, a tall building in the city. When she entered, the staff smiled at her like she was already part of their family. He looked up as she walked in. I see you got the letter, he said, smiling. I did, she said, tears shining in her eyes. I don't even know how to thank you. You just did, he said. You proved that all you needed was a chance. Lena took a deep breath. You changed my life, she said. But more than that, you reminded me that kindness still exists. I'll never forget that, Raymond nodded quietly. Then promise me something, he said. What's that? When you're strong enough, pass it on. Help someone else the way someone helped you. Lena smiled through her tears. I promise. Over the following weeks, her story began to spread in small circles at the center in the town, among people who once turned away from her. Those who had judged her before started to see her differently. Some even apologized, quietly ashamed of how they had treated her. But Lena didn't hold grudges. She didn't want revenge. She had found peace, and that was enough. She started a small class at the community center just for young single mothers. She called it New Beginnings. Every week, they came with their babies, sharing stories, helping each other, learning to read, to write, to dream again. One evening, after everyone had left, she sat alone in the quiet hall. The sunset painted the walls orange and gold. Her baby was asleep in his stroller beside her. She thought about everything that had happened, the funeral, the cruel whispers, the night she was dragged out of the church. And then she thought about this moment, the soft light, the quiet peace, the feeling of belonging. Life had taken her to the edge, but somehow, it had brought her back stronger. She looked at her child and whispered, "One day when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you how a stranger's kindness changed our world." And far away, Raymond sat in his office looking out at the city lights. He smiled softly, thinking of Lena and her courage. He knew she didn't need saving anymore. She was saving others now. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can grow into something much greater than anyone could imagine. Lena woke up one morning and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about where to sleep or what to eat or how to keep her baby warm through the night. The sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the small room in Raymond's guest house, and for a moment she just stood by the window, watching the golden light touch everything. Her baby was sleeping beside her, his little hand resting over his chest, rising and falling softly with each breath. Every day since Raymond had taken her in, Lena had started to heal, piece by piece. It wasn't quick and it wasn't easy, but it was real. The first few nights she couldn't even close her eyes without crying. She would wake up at odd hours, afraid someone might take it all away. The roof, the bed, the safety. She was used to losing things. She didn't yet trust the feeling of being cared for. But Raymond never pushed her. He gave her space and time. He would often come by the guest house once a week, not as a rich man checking on someone he helped, but as a quiet friend. Sometimes he brought baby clothes, sometimes groceries, and sometimes he just sat with her and talked. His kindness was gentle, the kind that made people feel seen without being judged. One day, while she was feeding her baby, he asked softly, "Have you thought about what you'd like to do when you're ready to start again?" Lena looked at him, unsure what to say. "I don't know if I can start again," she replied. "My life feels like it stopped that day at the church." Raymond nodded, understanding. It didn't stop, Lena, it just paused. And pauses can be good. They give us time to breathe before we move forward. Those words stayed in her mind for days. Slowly, she began to think about her past before Tom, before everything fell apart. She had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. She loved children, loved helping them learn and smile. That dream had been buried under years of hardship, but now it began to stir again quietly. With Raymond's help, she enrolled in a short community course for early childhood education. The first day, her hand shook as she entered the classroom. She felt out of place and everyone else looked younger, more confident. But then the instructor asked them to share why they wanted to teach. And when it was her turn, Lena simply said, "Because I know what it feels like to lose hope. I want to help children grow up believing they can always find it again." The room went silent for a moment, and then the instructor smiled. "That's the best reason I've heard all year." That small sentence gave Lena the courage she needed. She threw herself into her studies, attending every class, finishing every assignment even after long nights caring for her baby. Raymond quietly covered her tuition and daycare costs, never mentioning it again. He didn't want gratitude. He wanted her to feel proud of herself. Months passed and Lena changed. Her face no longer carried the constant shadow of fear. She began to laugh more, talk more. The people around her started to notice the calm strength she carried, the kind that comes only after surviving storms. One morning she went to meet Raymond at his office. He wanted to show her something. When she arrived, she saw boxes filled with toys, books, and art supplies stacked near the door. "What's all this?" she asked curiously. He smiled. "It's the start of something new. I've been planning to open a small learning center for children from struggling families, but I need someone to help me manage it. Someone who understands what it means to start with nothing and still believe." Lena blinked in surprise. "You mean me?" "Yes, you," Raymond said with a warm smile. "You're perfect for this. You've lived it, and that's something no degree can teach." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. It was gratitude, deep, wordless gratitude. She accepted the offer, and within weeks the learning center came to life. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of warmth. Bright colors, small chairs, a corner filled with donated books, and laughter echoing through the rooms. Lena poured her heart into it. Every child that came through the door reminded her of how fragile and precious life could be. She made sure each one felt loved, fed, and safe. Some parents came with tears in their eyes, saying they never thought they'd be able to afford such care for their children. Word spread fast in the community. People who once ignored her now looked at her with respect. Even the same church that had once thrown her out began to take notice. One Sunday, the pastor visited the learning center. He watched her working with the kids, his face softening as he saw the joy she brought into the room. Afterward, he approached her. "You've done something remarkable here," he said quietly. "We wronged you deeply. I hope someday you can forgive us." Lena took a deep breath. For a long time she had imagined this moment. She thought she would feel anger or bitterness, but instead she just felt peace. "I forgave you long ago," she said gently. "Holding on to pain only keeps it alive." The pastor nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "You're stronger than most of us," he whispered. When he left, she sat in the small playground outside the center, watching the children laugh and play. She smiled to herself, realizing that life had come full circle. She had been thrown out of a church, humiliated and lost. But now she was building a place that gave others the second chance she never had. One evening, as the sun was setting, Raymond came to visit the center. He found Lena sitting by the window, holding her baby on her lap, watching the orange sky. "You've done something beautiful here," he said softly. She looked at him and smiled. "You helped me believe I could." He shook his head. "You did the hard part, Lena. You chose to rise." They sat quietly for a while, the kind of silence that felt comforting rather than empty. Then Raymond spoke again. "I've been thinking, maybe we can expand this idea. There are many women out there just like you once were, struggling to find their place again. What if we start a foundation, a place that helps them rebuild their lives?" Lena's eyes widened. "That would be amazing," he smiled. "Then let's do it together." That night she could barely sleep. She kept thinking about all the women she had met at the shelter. Mothers with babies, young widows, women who had lost everything but still carried quiet strength inside them. Maybe this was her chance to give them hope, just as Raymond had given her. Over the next year, the Second Light Foundation was born. It started small with just a few volunteers and donations, but soon grew into something bigger. They offered training programs, counseling, and safe housing for struggling mothers. Many of the women who came through the doors left with jobs, confidence, and smiles they hadn't shown in years. Every time Lena spoke to a new mother, she remembered her own journey. The cold rain outside the church, the nights of hunger, the first kind word from a stranger, and she told them, "I know it feels impossible now, but kindness can find you when you least expect it. You just have to keep your heart open to it." Her story inspired not just those women, but the whole town. Newspapers wrote about her foundation, calling it a miracle of compassion. People from different cities reached out to donate. Even the church community started holding fundraisers to support her cause. Through it all, Lena remained humble. She didn't see herself as a hero. She saw herself as someone who had been lifted up and now wanted to lift others. Her baby, now a cheerful toddler, became the heart of the foundation. Everyone adored him, and he grew up surrounded by love and laughter. One day, Raymond invited her to a small event at one of his companies. When she arrived, he surprised her with something she never expected, a certificate recognizing her as the Heart of Hope Award recipient. The entire hall stood up and clapped. Lena felt shy, overwhelmed, but deeply moved. She stood there, holding the microphone with trembling hands, and said softly, "A few years ago, I was standing in the rain outside a church, holding my baby and wondering if life was over. But that moment led me here. It taught me that kindness can turn the darkest day into a new beginning. I owe this life to everyone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." As she spoke, Raymond looked on with quiet pride. He didn't see her as someone he had helped. He saw her as someone who had transformed pain into purpose. That night, when she returned home, Lena looked at her sleeping son and whispered, "We made it. And now we'll help others make it too." The journey that had started with tears at a funeral had turned into a story of hope and new beginnings. And though she still missed Tom, she knew he would have been proud of her strength, her kindness, and the way she had turned heartbreak into light for others. Years passed like quiet pages turning in a book. Lena's life, once full of pain and uncertainty, had slowly transformed into something she could finally call beautiful. The learning center she had started with Raymond had grown beyond anything she ever imagined. What began as one small classroom had now become a network of centers in different towns. Children laughed, learned, and played in safe, warm spaces, and mothers found work, training, and new hope. Every morning, Lena walked through the front doors of the main center with her son, who was now 8 years old. His laughter echoed in the hallways, reminding her how far they had come. He didn't remember the dark days, the nights of hunger or fear. All he knew was love, and that was enough for her. One bright morning, as she was helping the children prepare for a small event, she noticed her son running toward her, holding a handmade card. "Mama, I made this for you," he said proudly, handing it over. The card was messy, drawn with colored pencils and tiny stickers, but it was beautiful. In big, uneven letters he had written, "You're my hero." Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged him tightly. It was moments like these that made everything worth it. Later that afternoon, Raymond arrived for a meeting. He looked older now. His hair had more gray and his steps had slowed a little, but his smile was the same gentle one she had known all those years. He watched the children running around and said, "Do you ever stop to think how far this has come?" Lena smiled softly. "Sometimes. But then I remember how it all started, with a man who stopped his car on a rainy day." He laughed quietly. "And a woman who refused to give up even when she had nothing." They sat in the garden behind the center watching the kids play. The air was filled with laughter and sunshine, a sound that once felt like a dream. After a moment, Raymond said, "I've been thinking, Lena, I'm getting older, and I want to make sure this continues long after I'm gone. I want you to lead everything, the foundation, the centers, all of it." "You've earned it." Lena was shocked. "Raymond, I can't," he interrupted gently. "Yes, you can. You've already been doing it. You're the heart of this place. You're the reason it's alive." She didn't know what to say. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what he was entrusting her with. Months passed, and with Raymond's guidance, she took on a bigger role. She handled projects, meetings, and traveled to other towns to open new centers. Everywhere she went, people admired her strength and humility. She never forgot where she came from, and she made sure every new center remembered it too. On the wall of each building, a small plaque read, "No one is too broken to begin again." It became the foundation's motto. Simple, but powerful. One year, she was invited to speak at a national conference about women's empowerment. She was nervous at first, standing backstage in front of a large audience of business leaders and officials. She looked down at her old wedding ring. She still wore it, not out of grief, but as a reminder of the love that once gave her courage. When she walked onto the stage, the lights felt blinding. The room went quiet. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "I used to think life was something that happened to us," she said, "that we had no control when things went wrong. But life taught me something different. Sometimes the worst days lead us to the people and places that change everything." Her voice was calm but full of emotion. She spoke about the day she was dragged out of the church, about sleeping in cold streets, and about the stranger who didn't walk past her. She told them about Raymond's kindness, about the learning center, and about all the mothers who had found new strength through their work. By the time she finished, the entire hall stood and clapped. People had tears in their eyes. Reporters later wrote about her speech, calling her the woman who turned pain into purpose. But for Lena, it wasn't about fame. It was about the quiet lives she was able to touch, the children who smiled, the women who stood on their feet again, and the hope that kept growing wherever she went. A few years later, Raymond fell ill. It wasn't sudden, just the natural passing of time. Lena spent many afternoons visiting him. They would sit by the window of his home, watching the garden outside. Even then, his eyes carried that same gentle light. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he said softly, "You know, Lena, when I first saw you that day, I thought I was the one helping you. But it turns out you were the one who helped me. You reminded me why kindness matters." She squeezed his hand, trying not to cry. "You saved me, Raymond." He smiled weakly. "We saved each other." Those were among the last words he said to her. A few days later, he passed away peacefully. His funeral was simple but full of love. People from all walks of life came: children, mothers, workers, teachers. They all spoke about how his kindness had changed their lives. After the service, Lena stood beside his grave, her son's hand in hers. The boy looked up at her and asked, "Mama, will we see him again?" She smiled softly through her tears. "Maybe not here, but he'll always be with us, in everything we do." From that day on, she made it her mission to keep his dream alive. The foundation grew even larger, reaching other countries. People began sending letters from faraway places, telling her how her story had inspired them to start over. Years rolled by quietly. Her son grew into a young man, kind, humble, and full of purpose. He often helped at the centers, teaching children how to read and draw. He looked so much like his father, and every time Lena saw him, her heart swelled with both pride and tenderness. One evening, as she sat alone in her office after everyone had gone home, she opened an old box from the past. Inside were pieces of her journey: a photo from her wedding, her first teaching certificate, and a faded newspaper clipping about the day the foundation launched. She smiled as she looked at them. Every pain, every tear, every small act of kindness, they had all led her here. She thought about the night she had been thrown out of the church, about standing in the rain holding her baby, thinking her life was over. If only that younger version of herself could see her now, strong, at peace, surrounded by love. The next morning, the foundation held its 10-year anniversary celebration. People from across the country attended. The hall was filled with families, children, and women whose lives had changed because of Lena's work. When she walked onto the stage, the crowd stood and cheered. She felt shy, just like always, but also deeply moved. She began to speak, her voice calm and warm. 10 years ago, I thought my life had ended. But today I see that sometimes endings are really beginnings in disguise. I've learned that even when life breaks us, kindness can build us back stronger. I am standing here today because someone believed in me when no one else did, and because I chose not to give up." As she spoke, her son watched from the front row, clapping proudly. She finished with a smile. "To everyone who feels lost, please remember, no matter how dark it seems, the light is never gone. Sometimes it's just waiting for you to find it again." The crowd stood and clapped for a long time. Cameras flashed, children cheered, and tears filled the eyes of many. Raymond's portrait hung quietly on the stage behind her, surrounded by flowers. She looked at it for a moment, her eyes soft, as if saying thank you one last time. That night, as the celebration ended and everyone left, Lena stood alone in the quiet hall. The lights were dim, the chairs empty, and the echoes of laughter still hung in the air. She walked to the window, looked out at the city lights, and whispered, "We did it, Tom. We really did it." Her heart felt full, not because life had been easy, but because she had learned to find meaning even in the hardest places. Outside, the night breeze carried the faint sound of children's laughter from the nearby playground. She closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time, she didn't feel like the woman who was thrown out of a church. She felt like someone reborn, proof that hope can rise from anywhere. Her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever fallen and stood up again. And as she turned off the lights and walked home with her son, the moon shone gently above. A quiet reminder that even after the darkest nights, The world always finds a way to glow again.